Now, that video has been viewed 15.1 million times. X limited the post's visibility because of its rules on hateful conduct. But the bottom line, Andrew, is that almost everything you said in that video was completely untrue. And yet it was apparently seized upon online, spread wide and far, and made people believe what you were saying. So my question for you off the top here is, why did you race to spread such woeful disinformation, given the massive following you have, and encourage people to take action against a caricature and description of who had perpetrated this, which was simply untrue?
Well, firstly, I'll start by saying I didn't know Nigel Farage said those things about me, which is a shame because I'm actually a fan of him. I think he's trying to do the right thing. I also understand in his political sphere, sometimes he has to hang other people out to dry to save himself because he's getting heat also. Secondly, I'll argue with you about the fact that everything I said was untrue. I think the only thing I said that was untrue is that perhaps he was undocumented. It was a 17-year-old male. It was a migrant. He did kill little girls. And advocating for people to stand outside and make it clear that they're unhappy with what happened is not a dangerous ideology. We live in a democracy where we have the right to protest and the right to make it clear when our voices are not heard. I recently protested against the Olympic ceremony outside the French embassy. I'm not sure if you saw it, complaining about how they depicted Jesus Christ, because I was unhappy with what I saw. And I think that when people feel like they have a voice, they're not likely to get violent. And the problem we have now is that people do not have a voice, which is why we're seeing rioting, which is why we're seeing looting, because people do not feel like there's a political solution any longer. And what I was trying to do is encourage people to stand up and make their voice heard in a peaceful way to avoid violence. Because when people feel like they're not heard, violence is always the end result. We have people who cannot afford to pay their bills watching migrants arrive who are now being held up in hotels at the taxpayers' expense for indefinite periods of time. We're sending billions of dollars to Ukraine. Nobody voted for it. Nobody wants it. And everybody's struggling to pay their bills. Energy prices are through the roof. Inflation is through the roof. Now they no longer feel safe on their streets. They don't want to put their daughters outside to play. The police won't protect them. The police won't turn up for most crimes unless it's something you say bad on Facebook. And when they look for a political solution, they're ignored. What kind of powder keg are we building here through incompetent leadership in the UK? This is nothing but a leadership failure. There's not a country in the world where leadership could fail this spectacularly and see any
Andrew,
different result.
All right. But once again, Andrew, you are spouting nonsense in what you've just said. Not all of it, but some of it is nonsense. The
biggest problem we have in the world today is everybody's so emotional. Everybody's so upset all the time that if somebody says something bad about them, they pretend that person's completely bad. Nobody is completely bad. Nobody is completely evil. Everybody loves their children. Everybody wants to live in peace. A lot of people talk about the idea of war, but let me promise you, Piers, I'm a person who's had a very varied life. When you see people with machetes outside your door threatening you and the police aren't answering the phone anymore, you don't want war. You don't want war. The Muslims want peace. The white natives of the UK, the Christians want peace. Everybody wants peace. But when you have a political class which refuses to listen to absolutely anybody, do whatever they want, grind everyone into poverty irregardless, then you're going to have some sort of uprising. And it's unfortunate that the poor people, and I call them poor, I mean the average person, is turning on the average person as opposed to turning on the rich elites who are just plundering the country. That's the truth of what's happening here. We disagree on so many different points of view, and I think it's very important that we have conversation. The reason these riots are happening in the first place is because everybody's afraid to talk. I'm prepared to sit down with somebody I don't like and don't agree with.
That's complete nonsense.
To talk to Tommy.
That's nonsense. The reason the riots are happening is people like you and Tommy Robinson have been spewing utter disinformation, which has led people to believe that the person that perpetrated these despicable crimes was an illegal Muslim migrant who was on the MI6 terror watch list.
Firstly,
right. I'm saying you and Tommy Robinson, between you, okay, I'm saying between you,
but
you
where's
put
the logic
out there
failure?
a completely false impression.
There's a logic failure of lumping me in with somebody who I don't agree with and saying, oh, you and him said X.
So do you denounce Tommy Robinson?
Tommy Robinson and I disagree on a whole bunch of issues. I think he's completely incorrect on his view of Islam. We're not playing this game of constant denouncing.
Do you denounce him for inciting the rioting?
I denounce him for everything bad he said about Islam. He's absolutely incorrect, and I cannot be his friend or support him for that reason.
No, for inciting the rioting by telling
people
it was a Muslim illegal
I'm not going to say
migrant.
it's not for me. It's not for me to decide who has incited the rioting, and it's not for you to decide.
Why? You can't denounce that?
A court denounce what? I'm not going to sit here and say who's in charge of the riots because nobody knows.
Telling people he was an illegal Muslim.
my view on why the riots happened is because I believe that the native population, the Christian population of the UK, feels like their voice is not heard. I think if their voice was heard and they had correct
that's not why the riots happened.
Things would not be happening.
That's not why the riots
exactly
happened.
Why if the police kept people safe like they do in Dubai, you could have a multicultural society. In Dubai, you have all different cultures, 80% immigration. Everybody praises it as a beautiful place to live because it is safe, because the police keep it safe. When the police fail to protect little girls, you can't walk down London Bridge without getting stabbed. You can't wear a nice watch without getting robbed. You can't walk on your phone without getting stolen.
Why don't you just answer my question?
Houses are broken into.
Why don't you answer my question?
I'm answering it. When the police fail to protect anybody, you're going to see...
Why did you lie?
Yes, they are. They fail on every level.
Are you prepared to apologize? Why did you lie?
I've already answered and said I was incorrect saying he was an illegal migrant. He was a migrant. And I'm not going to apologize to anybody who stabbed 3 little girls. Perhaps that's your business, Piers. That's not mine.
He wasn't a migrant. He was born in Wales.
Solitary for the rest of his life.
He was born in you and Tommy Robinson, between you and others who were amplifying and spreading this bullshit about who this person was, ended up with rioting against Muslims who had nothing to do with the killing of those girls.
Piers.
And you as a Muslim of all people should have been the first to denounce it.
Of course, Piers. No, Piers. The logic failed. You're a smart man. But are you trying to say that if you say anything online, you are now responsible for all the consequences of that action? So if Cardi B sings about how she can drug men and lie that they raped her, if a girl then lies about being raped and ruins that man's life, Cardi B is responsible? Is that what you're saying? That is that's such a logic fail. It doesn't even make sense.
No, I'm not saying that.
There's a lot of people who say a lot of things online. There's a lot of people who advocate for insane things online all of the time.
Fine, stop shouting.
I'm not telling you to not be able to talk.
I believe you've accepted in this interview that you spread disinformation about the person who perpetrated these crimes being an illegal immigrant to the UK. Would you like to apologise for spreading that wrong information?
If the whole video was expressing my distaste, dissatisfaction, and disgust at the events that took place, I believe that I was 95% accurate and got a detail wrong. I didn't get anything important wrong. A 17-year-old man stabbed little girls in a Taylor Swift concert. And that shouldn't ever happen. That shouldn't ever happen,
believed
sir.
It was an illegal
that should never happen. That should never happen anywhere. So for you to sit and say, oh, well, us as the legacy media who never get anything wrong ever expect 100% accuracy when all you do is lie, I made it very clear that it is unacceptable that little girls die on the streets. And that people need to make it clear that we are not going to accept this
lies
anymore.
About who did it. Yeah, listen, I'll take your lectures morning, noon, and night. It makes no difference to me whatsoever. But would you like to take this opportunity finally to tell the rioters to stop rioting? Yes or no?
Absolutely. Well, considering I've been saying that for the last 4 days on Twitter and you didn't read any of the tweets out, they should be in front of you. There's at least 30. Let me make it clear to the people on both sides of the equation, all of my brothers in Islam and all of the Christians and native people of the UK who feel like they're underrepresented. You have more in common with the people you live amongst than you do with these political elites. The people you live amongst love their children and they're struggling to pay the bills exactly like you are. There's no reason for UK, one of the greatest countries in the world, one of the largest empires in history, to be plunged into poverty if it wasn't being looted by a political class that do not care about you. And the people who do not care about you, the number one thing they want is the different breeds or different types or different categories of poor people to fight so nobody looks up and sees who the real enemy is. Britain can be a rich country and it can be prosperous and it can be safe and it can be regulated and the police can respond and it can be as beautiful as a lot as the first world Islamic nations are. There's no reason why it has to be the way it is unless a political class was failing the people who they're supposed to represent for generations. And that's where this anger and hatred comes from. Not because a video was made on Twitter. That is so infantile and asinine to believe that some little video on Twitter started all of these things.
That is what's happening.
So stop rioting amongst each other and realize who the real enemy of your freedom is. When you understand the truth about this world, listen, I was born on a Luton council estate and now I have hundreds of millions of dollars. And let me promise you, it's never poor versus poor. It's rich versus poor. When a black billionaire and a white billionaire meet, there is no racism because they are billionaires. Racism is what they use to divide the poor people, to stop us realizing that they lie about every single thing on the news, that they inflate the currency constantly, they send our money away to wars we're not interested in, nobody can afford their bills, nobody can afford health care, and you're going to die alone in some nursing home because you can't afford a nice house because even then they're going to inheritance tax it. They don't want you realizing the truth, and that's why they want the poor people to fight the poor people.
You know what?